The crisis that we're now seeing at the U.S. Mexico border is all because of former President Donald Trump. That is, if we listen to the narrative that Democrats continue to throw at us. With the recent visit of both Trump and President Biden to two very contrasting areas within the border, Democratic leadership, they decided to highlight how it's all Trump's fault. The border is expected to play a very huge role in this year's 2024 presidential elections. More and more Americans are now growing concerned of how this is actually going to affect the nation as a whole. Now, if you ask Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer about this situation, he would just tell you that it's all the doing of Trump. Schumer argued that President Biden introduced the best solution for our borders. Meanwhile, Trump is just using it for his political gain. Schumer says that Trump is taking credit for derailing their plans for the border and that the former president should just kind of look in the mirror every time he blames President Biden for our open borders.
President Biden knows the border is a serious problem. So look at what he's done. He sat down with Republicans to draft the strongest, most comprehensive border security bill America has seen in decades. And we worked with him here in the Senate to make that happen. Let me say again, President Biden knows the border is a serious problem, and that's why he sat down with Republicans to draft the strongest, most comprehensive border bill America has seen in decades. But what did Donald Trump do? Donald Trump deliberately sabotaged the very same border reforms he spent years calling for, because he wants to exploit the border for the campaign trail. He explicitly took credit for the bill going down. Please blame it on me. Those were his words. It was Donald Trump who sabotaged the bill with dramatic updates to asylum. It was Donald Trump who sabotaged a bill that reformed parole authority. It was Donald Trump who sabotaged the bill that provided new resources to Border Patrol agents. And it was Donald Trump who sabotaged the bill endorsed by the Border Patrol Union, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, and the Chamber of Commerce. Hardly liberal groups.
However, many seem to disagree with Schumer. Some critics of the Biden administration have tried to remind the senator that President Biden removed the restrictions on the border on his very first day. Restrictive policies that were put in place by former President Trump. Which begs the question, why can't President Biden do what Trump did when he was president? Critics of the Biden administration argue that he's not doing it because he wants funding for Ukraine. But again, that's just more speculation. Now, before we really dig into this thing and really explore what's really going on, all I ask is that you guys take 1 second, drop a quick like for the video. I totally appreciate that. And I just want to thank you guys so much for always sharing my videos. You guys are amazing. It totally helps out the channel. But since we already kind of touched on this topic, let's talk about the war and how Americans seem to be funding it. So Senator Josh Hawley, he sounded as if he's had enough and pretty much went on a tirade blasting Senate leadership. He said that the United States always has money for war, that the United States is willing to make hundreds of millions of dollars available to the private sector in the Ukraine, money that was provided by American taxpayers. He's even gone so far as to say that we've got money without end for overseas wars, but refuse to spend a dime on our own citizens. Now, I believe that case easily could be made for veterans who are homeless, for seniors on Social Security, and for those who are on SSI and SSDI. It makes you question just how much more money is needed for Ukraine to win against Russia. Some experts believe that this war will just continue to drone on as a stalemate, as there is just no winning against Russia. They're unbeatable. The notion is that sending over $60 billion to the Ukraine would ensure that they win. But it's also worth noting that the United States has sent truckloads of money there, yet nothing seems to be getting any better. There's also the question of Russia in this entire situation. Are they just going to kind of wait around and see if money will be sent to Ukraine before they attack? Because they've been told by Senate leadership that if Ukraine doesn't get this money, then it's possible that Ukraine loses. Now, there's also words from other senators where they say that we should be pushing for peace instead of conflict. But that doesn't seem to be the goal for the Biden administration. Republican leadership, namely House Speaker Mike Johnson, he's pushing back on the plan from the White House. Johnson recently had a one-on-one with Biden where he basically told the president that the House was actively pursuing and investigating all of the various options for their supplemental aid requests. However, they argue that we must secure our border and fund our government before securing another country's border or even funding another country's priorities. One takeaway that I think that we should all be aware of is that this meeting between Johnson, Schumer, McConnell, Jeffries, and President Biden became very intense. Schumer admitted that the discussion on Ukraine was one of the most intense Oval Office meetings that he's been in. And this this is probably due to the fact that House Speaker Johnson has for months said that aid to Ukraine will be passed if help for the border is provided. Johnson later admitted that all four other people in the room tried to pressure him to do what they wanted. Some analysts argue that this problem could be solved if we didn't mix legislation. Now, if you want to protect the border, then make a bill for the border. If you want to give billions of dollars of taxpayer money to Ukraine, then make a bill for that. The point is that the American people should have a very clear view as to where people stand. It gives us a better idea of the priorities of our lawmakers. And since we talked about it already, it's noticeable how some government officials have turned a complete 180 when it comes to our borders. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is now calling for changes to sanctuary city laws. So Adams says that illegal immigrants who commit felonies should be turned over to immigration and customs enforcement for them to be deported back home. Now, this is due to the uptick of crime in their city.
The mayor's shift in opinion on sanctuary laws follows a series of high-profile crimes in which many of the accused suspects are newly arrived asylum seekers. Many times this week, he argued that current policies are a detriment to public safety. Mayor Adams on Tuesday called for more cooperation between federal immigration officials and local police, supporting the idea of them working together to deport migrants who are suspected of serious crimes.
I don't believe people who are violent in our city and commit repeated crimes should have the privilege of being in our city.
The city first began limiting cooperation with federal immigration authorities in the 1980s. But in 2014, under Mayor Bill de Blasio, City Council added teeth to previous executive orders, passing a law that prohibits law enforcement from honoring ICE detainer requests if a foreign national has been charged with a crime but not convicted.
The mere fact we cannot share with ICE that this person has committed 3 robberies, that this person is part of an organized gang crew. Mere fact we can't say that and can't communicate with that, that's problematic for me.
Critics argue that Adams only changed his mind when more of his constituents pushed back and they were heavily affected by people coming into the country. This is also evident with what more and more mainstream media is showing to us, as they just can't hide the fact that sanctuary cities are facing enormous challenges with illegal immigrants. Now, on the topic of challenges, President Joe Biden is facing a massive one in relation to questions about his cognitive ability. So a report from Special Counselor Robert Hur said that the president can't face a jury due to his mental issues. Hur stated that President Biden would probably present himself to a jury as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Claims that President Biden himself was torn up about, as he said that he's in incredible mental shape. Many have argued that all of this could be cleared up with just a simple cognitive test. However, the White House sees no need for that at all, even though many voters are worried about this very issue. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre went on record to say that the president's doctors conducted a more than 2-hour medical test of Biden. Within that time, Jean-Pierre said that the doctors were so impressed with President Biden's mental sharpness that they chose not to conduct a cognitive test. I have a hard time believing that. She also went ahead and added that the president passes a cognitive test every single day when he goes to work and talks about different topics one after another, which raises a very big issue for critics. If Biden is so mentally sharp, then should he be charged for the mishandling classified information? Now, related to this, author and former TV psychologist Dr. Phil McGraw, he recently went on air to say that the president should do what the American people want him to do. He said that people who have nothing to hide nothing. The topic of age is a huge concern for a lot of voters. In fact, more than 80% of registered voters in 7 battleground states, they said that the president's just too old for office, something that he can quickly squash with a simple cognitive test. But the expectation is that the president won't go through the lengths of proving his mental acuity. But what are your thoughts on all this? Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to continue to do my best to keep you guys informed on everything that's going on around us. Before I go, I just want to thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for liking and sharing these videos. I'll see you on the next one.